evening, everyone. I want to welcome those of you that have come to our program here at the Onaga Historical Museum this evening. We are in for a treat. Donn Teske is going to talk about his experiences when he went to Senegal and worked with some agricultural people, I believe, in Senegal. It's always a treat with Donn. You have some humor, you have some history, and you have some education. So you combine all three things in one presentation. So, Donn?
Thank you. Baffle them with bullcrap. Thank you, Debbie. I really want to stress the fact that I was over there for 2 weeks. I barely got my feet wet. I mean, Debbie ought to be giving this presentation. How many years did you do the Peace Corps?
Well, in Ecuador, 3.5.
3.5 years? I mean, you had a kid there. And,
yeah, I did.
You know, I did this presentation once on Zoom, and Dan Nagangas got on, and he spent 9 years in Africa with the Peace Corps, and it's like, I was there for 2 weeks. But I kind of watched, and people seemed to want to hear about it, and so I put this slideshow together 13 years ago when I traveled in 2010, and how it got started was I was at a National Farmers Union meeting, and they said that they just agreed with NCBA CLUSA to try and do some farmer exchanges with their projects, and this was new and experimental, so nobody knew what was going on. And you know, I got home and got to looking at the email more, and I said, God, I'd like to do that someday. And I told Ma, I said, you know, when life slows down, I'd like to do that someday. And then I made the mistake of emailing the people at NCBA CLUSA and going, you know, when my life slows down some, I'd really like to do this someday. And 2 weeks later, I'm in Senegal, Africa. And the farm just came to a halt while I was gone, and them 2 weeks was wild because I had to get a whole series of shots and pills and stuff that wasn't supposed to be done in 2 weeks. And when I went to the airport, I had no idea if there was a ticket waiting for me there. I didn't know if anybody was meeting me on the other end of the flight. It was discombobulated. And so I kind of put this together to show people the plan and the family and where we live, and nobody here really needs to know that. That guy looks familiar.
Yeah,
you rode in that bus.
That's my husband.
I was there.
Yeah.
not
so
not you.
This is a Teske homestead. So Michael Teske, my great-great-grandfather's elderly bearded one in the front with the beard there. So they're holding up their glasses of beer and their fiddle.
Home brew?
Huh?
Home brew?
Probably wine too. They brewed their own wine, but they moved 2 old houses onto the log cabin that the clan grew. This is on our farm, and the other daughter lives there, but this is right after the tornado hit it in the 30s. Debbie, you ought to like that picture. That's the Hindenburg Valley. And so this is what I put together to show over there. And you know, when I was working with the village, you know, they're going, we want your equipment. We want that. And it's like, my equipment's 40 years old, you know. And this slide really blew their mind because they were so worried I was going to overheat, and I was telling them, no, it's hotter at home than it is here. And they couldn't believe that the same area could have that kind of snow and that kind of heat. And that's Kansas. Anyhow, like I said, it was NCBA CLUSA, National Cooperative Business Association, and these were federal dollars that sent me over there. I did it 2nd through the 17th in 2010. And so this is Senegal. And you can see down in the corner where it is in Africa. It's the farthest west you can go in Africa.
It's north of Guinea, right?
Yep, well, Guinea's, here's Gambia, and then here's Guinea. Yeah. And so they call this the face of Dakar, or Senegal. Dakar is the nose sticking out in the ocean. And then the country of Gambia is the mouth. That's a separate country. And so this is the face of Senegal. Dakar is where a lot of the slaves were shipped out of Africa. There was an island there that was a transfer point. And anyhow, so I flew eight hours to Brussels, and that was my first experience at Brussels in a multi-sex restroom. Now they're common here. And then it was another 8 hours to Dakar. And the gal sitting out went beside me from the trip from Brussels to Dakar didn't understand any English, and I didn't understand anything she said. But we had a wonderful conversation because we were showing each other pictures of our grandkids, and we did fine. Got off the airplane and the car. That guy running at me didn't like the idea that I turned around to take a picture. He chewed my butt. But anyhow, so then I get herded inside the airport, and they herd us into 3 different lines, and there's a soldier with a machine gun standing between each line, and go up to customs, and he wanted to know where I was going in Senegal, and I go, I don't know. And he didn't really know English, and so then he wanted to know who was meeting me, and I go, I don't know. He got really frustrated with me. Finally, he just threw up his arms in frustration and stamped it and sent me on. So then I got my bag. I didn't know what to do. All these people were trying to take my bag out of my hand. Finally, I grabbed my bag and held on to it and walked outside the airport, and there was a guy standing there holding up a sign with Teske on it. I was really happy to see that sign. And it was Yagamar that was holding up that sign. And he was my interpreter and my guy for the 2 weeks. And just a wonderfully nice kid, hardly knew any English and just hated my slang. He just couldn't understand that at all. And so then we started heading to a hotel in Dakar. We was gonna head out in the country the next day. I'm going, holy cow, this is really the slums. And it was, no, it ain't. And so then we go by the statue by the ocean. And to give you some perspective, see that right there? That's a group of people standing on the steps. That thing is that huge, made out of bronze or whatever. I mean,
what did it depict?
Something about the independence of Africa or something, but basically Yagamar said it could have fed a lot of people.
Yeah.
That was a hotel room in Dakar. We were about a block from their country's capital.
You were alone there?
Yeah.
You were the only one that...
Yeah. This was all experimental. We didn't really know what we was doing or anything.
Okay.
I was a guinea pig. And so when we went out and ate, and no, it wasn't even that. Checking in, by the time we got there, it was after dark. And how did that work? Anyhow, it was after dark, and there wasn't anybody at the front desk, and I knew which room I had, so I must have been in there earlier and dumped my bags or something. Then we went out and ate supper. But anyhow, I come back there and everybody at the desk, and around the desk there's lights, but the halls were all dark. And so they had a button on the wall, and you push that button, and then the lights will come on for a timer, and then it goes off again. And so I figured that out. I mosey down there and I find my way to the room, and as soon as I'm ready to put the key in the slot, the lights go off. So I got to feel my way all the way back to the front and push that button again, and then I hurried faster up there. And I got the key in, I got the door unlocked, no lights had come on in the room. And so then the lights went off again, and so I fought my way back and pushed the hell out again and hurried up there again. And I finally figured out the key had that plastic thing and you had to put it in the slot in the wall. And then you could have electricity in the room. But until then, the whole room had no electricity. There had no air conditioning, no lights or nothing. And so that was my first experience with energy conservation. I was kind of impressed after I finally figured it out. Went out and ate a hamburger that night. Came out the next morning to head out, and that wasn't foggy. It was just so humid the camera steamed up. And that was pretty normal traffic. Stopped and filled up gas before we left. Guard with a billy club. That looked like a place from home. So, we're out on the road. Dakar is the largest city in the country, heading to Cadillac, the third largest city in the country, and a population of like 150,000. This is the road between the two. And it's a brand new highway. And apparently, from what I could understand from Yagamar, the contractor was a buddy of the president or something. But that's a brand new highway going between two major cities. And you'd see all kinds of stuff along there. And there was one place that there was a truck stopped in the highway. And we worked our way around it. They had the engine out, and there were two guys overhauling the engine on the highway in front of the truck. They had the head off and the pan off, and they were changing the piston. And they were doing it on the highway, you know. And we come across another truck loaded down like that, and it busted a rear axle, and the guy was underneath jacking it up, and he was laying under the truck in the shade while he was jacking. And it's just, you know, it's just different mindset there. So termite mounds all over. Senegal was farmed hard since the 1500s by the French. French is their official language. It's all farmed out crap. French may be their official language, but everybody I seen was speaking Wolof, which is a local dialect. Cattle roam freely. There should be a herder with them. There's herders and there's farmers. And the farmers are always mad at the herders because the herders let the cattle eat their crops and they're not supposed to, but that's good food, and kind of like the cowboys and the sod busters. So we get to Cadillac. This is the hotel I stayed at. They said that's the best hotel in the city. In a little bit I'll get to a different topic, and you see this orange van here and the blue one there. But I'll get to that in a little bit. But this was the Hotel de Paris. And it was okay. I just walked out in the street, so the hotel is to the left. This is a sidewalk, so if you misstep on the sidewalk, you fall in the sewer.
Oh.
And then down the hill there's actually a port. And this is 100 miles inland, but they got a port there. And this is the main street there in front of the hotel. And so I'd go out at night and smoke my stogie and sit on that ledge in front of the hotel and watch the country go by. And this is just some pictures I took of different things wandering by the hotel. This guy hung around me all the time. And reflecting back on it, I think he was kind of making sure I didn't get in trouble, I think. But he claimed he sold stuff. He had to hold it up, so I took the picture. But the more I look at him, I think that guy knows how to take care of himself.
I have that necklace that he was holding. I have that.
Could be. That's where it came from. But like if I'd wander off to the market, he'd want to tag along, or somebody else would.
Wanted to be sure you got back where you were supposed to be.
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe not get into something you were
Probably
Yeah.
the government.
So anyhow, there were beggar kids everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And they had a full-time doorman, and he'd run them off from in front of the hotel. Well, he went in one for a little bit once, and they were just swarming me, begging, with their hungry eyes, and looked like they were starving. And I held up the camera and went, picture, and all at once I had all these happy kids sitting on the wall, holding up their favorite toys, and I took their picture, and then they all swarmed me, and I had to see their picture on the camera, and we had a great time, but I kept my hand on my wallet the whole time.
Just say, they didn't ask you for money?
Well, they were at first, yeah.
Well, after you took their picture.
No, they didn't. They were just tickled. They were just an average bunch of kids then. So that was a room there, fine room. I stayed in worse than I stayed. Shower. So this is after my first night sleeping in Cadillac. And so you see all that red in different places. I thought, well, and I'm really bleeding somewhere. And I got looking closer, and those were all mosquitoes I rolled on at night.
Oh, really? Wow.
And after that, before I went to bed at night, Kathy made me bring like super duper deep stuff or whatever, a whole bunch of it, and it's like, I don't need that. I was really glad she made me do it, because I could sleep that way at night. She didn't want me to go at all. Kathy was just sure I was going to end up in a stew pot. I'm an old man anyhow, what the hell. And so the dining room there at the hotel, very nice. That gentleman was really nice, and the meal, that was a fish steak. Yeah, I could live on that. That's a good meal.
Coca-Cola.
Huh?
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I didn't drink any water while I was there.
No.
Unless it was out of a bottle.
Ice cubes I wouldn't either.
Yeah, I stayed healthy the whole time, but so one unique thing about this is he knew just a little bit of English too, just barely, and after a few nights there, Ramadan was starting to happen, which is their religious holiday. They're 95% Muslim there, and so I said, what can I do to respect Ramadan, and what can I do to behave right? And he says, oh, you'll be fine. You're here for good things. And then he says, well, maybe you don't want to smoke your cigar out in front of the hotel and just go to the courtyard and do it. Sure, I can do that. And so I went out after Ramadan started and to smoke my cigar, and he was out there on his prayer mat in the process of whatever he was doing. And so I turned around to leave, and he stopped me, and he said, no, go have your cigar, that's fine. And he went ahead and did his prayers, and I had my cigar, and it was all good, but he was nice.
You could have smoked after dark.
I did smoke after dark.
Yeah, Ramadan, you can smoke and drink water and have all the food you want, as long as it's dark out.
I don't know, it was dark, and he was doing the praying, and I was doing the smoking. Okay. I understand what you're saying. So I was like the only white person I'd seen the whole time. Driving from Dakar to Cadillac, the police stopped us twice and wanted to know. They said there's no white people come in here except for bad things. And so then Yagamar had to work through the whole, him and my driver, Hassim, they had to explain everything to him, and they'd finally let us go on. But it was that black, and so one day, and I was like the only one in the whole hotel, and then one day this army truck pulls in, and it's tourism de Africa, and it's French, and there's a French army truck full of French people. So I still didn't understand the language, but there was a little bit of white color there. So this is a local cafe close to where we were based out of. The other young man there is Hassim, my driver. He liked his iPods or his earbuds or whatever, but I think he had some military training too, but he really liked driving that Ford pickup. You can see me taking his picture in the window.
What was the temperature during the day and the evening?
Honestly, it was hotter here during that time in August than it was there, but it wasn't, I mean, it was hot. but it wasn't bad hot. They averaged 16 inches of rain, so, and it all comes in like 2 months, so they try and raise their crops on 16 inches of rain. This is inside the cafe. That's a typical meal, and you know, there'd be some vegetables, bed of rice or couscous, and piece of hunk of meat. And then there'd always be these 2 globs. And they said the green one, I asked him what it was, and he says that comes from the leaves of some tree. And he said the red one, he says, you don't want to know where that comes from. But it's good, it was good.
You had been anyway.
So their market area, I mean, we have farmers markets here and that's a great thing, but their market area, that's all they got. I mean, that's everything they buy there for their survival is in the market area. And it's huge in KLA. And that's pretty typical of what you see it. This is Clusa office building, which is a little more modern. And I was looking out the window and took that picture, and you can see the cabs, and most of the cabs are motorcycles, but here's a group of cars. And then the market area goes on and on back here. And so that was the restroom in this brand new fancy building, and a fat guy like me, you don't do the thinker pose. But that was also my first exposure to, I had the 2 buttons for conserving water. I mean, it's just, I was running into things there I hadn't seen here yet. And it was a learning experience for me.
Did you have to throw away the toilet paper, or did it go down
It went down,
okay.
yeah. But boy, toilet paper, that was a valuable commodity. And like, you know, I ran out much sooner than they must have thought I was going to do it in the hotel room in Cadillac. You know how embarrassing it is to go up to the front desk and you don't know the language and you're trying to tell them you're out of toilet paper?
Yeah. You bring them the empty roll.
Yeah.
Swirl it around.
Then they were, she finally got the message and she gave me one, but she really frowned at me. And at the airport coming home, you know, I'm going to take a dump before I get on the airplane, you know. I go in the restroom and there's no toilet paper, any of the stalls. Modern airport there, the car, and I walk out and go, well, I'll just do it on the plane. And there's a guy hollers at me, and he's sitting there beside the door where you walk into the restroom, and he's sitting on a mountain of toilet paper. And he just holds it up and smiles.
You gotta buy it.
Yeah. And I went, nah, and I just walked away. And he hollered at me as long as he could see me, he was hollering at me. So we stopped to fill a tire that was CP, and I told him I thought he ought to get it fixed. And nah. But you can see right there's a critter drawn. They were butchering a goat right beside there. And so, just right out in front. And so, this is one of the booths, and they were selling utensils. And I brought a couple home, so you know, I pass them around, Lisa, but
You want it back, don't you?
yeah,
Okay.
but
Aluminum.
they're made out of melted car transmissions.
Yeah.
And so they're making their cooking utensils from junk cars. And you can see like the strainer ladle, you can just see where they had a square-headed nail that they were making the holes with. And really some elaborate drawing on it and stuff. Like, I'm
That's
kind
what
of
we need to do
impressed.
more of, is recycle.
Yeah. Well, they're doing that.
There you go, yeah.
Get to see who's next.
And so just rows and rows and rows of booths and stalls. And so then I try to take a picture of the women, and they go, no, and Hank, cover themselves up. And so I start walking on, and then she'd holler at me to come back, and then she wanted me to take her picture with her kid. And so I guess that somehow they're supposed to be humble or something where you're not supposed to get your picture taken, but Then when you're not gonna do it, it's like, oh no, take our picture. So anyhow, we came to that booth and my guide, he was rambling on, and I couldn't understand him. And finally he said Viagra. So I guess that's their equivalent of Viagra.
Looks like worms.
Yeah, it does kinda. That was the meat market.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be swatting flies with that fly swatter, but he was just using it to keep them away from his face. That was a fish market, and they didn't want their picture taken, but I literally could not tell what color the fish were until the flies swarmed up once, and then when they did, I quick took the picture. They were so, it was just covered black with flies. And this enterprising young man is pressing ground nuts for peanuts, they call them ground nuts there, for cooking oil. And so he's got that hydraulic jack and pressing it out into a pan, and then he goes outside and pours it in the top of that barrel with some fire going underneath it, and that's how they process it to sell it. So that's your cooking oil. This one they were making soap balls, so all that steam and soap goo, whatever, they're making a soap ball.
What fat did they use for the soap?
I'm sorry?
Did you see what fat they were using for the
I
soap?
didn't pay that much attention. I wondered about it afterwards too.
The tomato can says horse on it, cheval.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means horse.
Horse?
That's probably just the brand name of those canned tomatoes, but I was being funny about
That's confusing.
Okay.
It's horse fat.
Oh, might be. I mean, there ain't much fat anywhere in that country. So we were walking down one of them aisles one time, and a whole batch of young men come running up to me and oh yabber yabber. What? And they went like, stay. And I went, okay, so I'm just standing there, and they go running off, and pretty quick they bring back this really fat black guy, and they stand us side by side and go, ah!
Someone like you.
Yeah. We all had a lot of fun. So this is that port down there, but that mountain out there is salt, and so they got all these settling basins, and this is a business, and so that's a mountain of salt out there. If you go to Google Earth, you can see that's a lot of area that they're doing it in. So then we head off for our Key Gay. That was typical traffic. You didn't get in a hurry. Nobody moved fast. Nobody did anything fast. The animals didn't move fast. I think if anybody would move fast, they'd die because it wouldn't fit the flow of things, you know. Running along the side of the beach, you can see what pollution does, and it's sad that we here in America have drinkable water out of every faucet. I mean, there I couldn't drink the water. You needed the plastic bottles, but here we don't need the plastic bottles, but everybody insists on them. It drives me nuts. So them are trucks lined up to load salt, and that's just barely wide enough for that truck to be on. They got going out to that salt pile in the middle. This is one of the shuttle buses. Everybody just get on and off. Nobody paid. I have no idea how the thing functioned, but one had a monkey riding on the back of it. And then we started getting into farming country, and that's peanuts there.
One of the horse.
I don't think your fat came from the horse.
Yeah, and that's what all the animals look like that. And we've got friends, I'll get into it a little bit, with a couple of Peace Corps gals, and one of them was a horse person, and she said that she had sent pictures back to her college professor, and he just figured they're all so wormy that if you'd actually worm them, they'd die from the worming, and that's what she thought, or she thought he thought. But that was a pretty typical scene. you'd see a tractor once in a while that looked like it hadn't run in years and that kind of thing. So they raise three main crops. They raise millet and corn for subsistence, and then they raise ground nuts to sell for their money to pay the church so their kids can go to school and that kind of stuff. Well, some country dumped so many peanuts on the world market, it crashed the prices of the world peanuts, and so they got their money for that third of their triangle. So what my project was supposed to do was to help work with them on improving their millet production and then forming a co-op to sell their excess millet production in the markets to make up that difference.
Millet, can you tell us what that is? That isn't another name for Milo, is it?
Kinda.
Okay.
It's all derived from the same family, and I'll
Yeah.
show you some pictures shortly.
Okay.
And looking at the seed, you can't tell any difference.
Okay.
In fact, you know, the human consumption, grain sorghum and millet are almost interchangeable around the world, except for here. But them are piles of peanuts, like we have piles of corn or piles of Milo sitting out by the elevators. Those are tart peanuts. And they got these huge peanut processing facilities. These guys can't sell it. That sounds familiar. So Kira Gay, village of 900, no electricity, just received running water right before I got there. We'd stopped off at a non-profit. This is a Switzerland aid agency. And so we stopped there, they had Wi-Fi, did a little visiting, but then we go out to the village. And so this is the first people I've seen when we pull into the village. It's a beautiful photo. And look what she's got in her hand.
Phone.
It's a cell phone. I was so shocked. Everybody there has cell phones. They never even developed a hard line infrastructure for telephones. They went right to cell phones. And, you know, they don't have electricity in the village, but they got cell phones. Somehow they're charging the suckers.
How do they charge them?
I never found out while I was there.
And how
And
many
Solar
charges?
charges?
Batteries.
Solar charger.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, go down to the local.
They
Car.
sit there at night and crank.
Oh my gosh.
But anyhow, when I was talking about, see those two vans in front of the hotel?
Yeah,
The blue one, Trago, is an American company, and the orange one is Orange, and that's a French company, and they're both cell phone companies. And they got super modern buildings in Cadillac, and like Orange Stadium in Dakar when we drove by it, I mean, that's like Arrowhead Stadium, it's Orange Stadium in Dakar. And so that's the big business. And it's technology beyond what I had ever seen 13 years ago here. I mean, they paid everything, bills. There'd be 100 people lined up at those phone offices to go in and put money down, and then everything they buy, they did it through their phones 13 years ago. And so,
They do their banking through their phone. That's what
yeah,
you're saying.
they'd pay for goods or anything, they'd hold their phone up and they'd do it 13 years ago. Now we're just starting to do it now here. And
Did they do that in the market then too? And they went,
I just wasn't paying that much attention there. But, you know, I said, man, you know, my cell phone quit working as soon as we left the United States. And I went, man, I ought to get me a phone or something, you know, call home. And he said, oh, that's right, we ought to get you a phone. And he got me a phone, brand new, and I said, I'll just use it if I have to. And he goes, no, just use it. It worked perfect. I could call home just like calling home from here. It just worked perfect, and there was no problems. It had a flashlight on it. I'd never seen a cell phone with a flashlight. You could see in the dark. And I go, yeah, these are all things I didn't know
It was mounted off
about.
of satellites.
It just worked perfect, and And I had to call home a lot because every day Blue Valley would lock me up on my internet. And so I was trying to do my job too. And I'd call them up and say, "You locked me out of my internet." "Well, we got emails coming in from Africa." And I went, "Well, yeah, I'm in Africa." "Oh, okay." So that day started me up, and then the next day we'd have to start all over again. So between that and keeping up with the grandkids and the farm at home and making sure nobody killed anybody else, I was on that phone a lot. And when I'd run out of time, there's street vendors everywhere. They just come up to the car trying to sell you everything from underwear to everything, but a lot of them is phone time. And so I paid $10 for a phone card, and so then you scratch it like a lottery ticket, and you just enter your code in, and then you got that much more time on your phone again. And for them 2 weeks, I called home a lot, and I didn't spend more than $20 on telephone the whole time on that cell phone. It was amazing.
So did you bring the phone home with you?
No, it stayed there for the next person, and yeah, but I was really impressed for this backwards country. They were way ahead of us at telephone. So their mosque, they'd let me look in, but they wouldn't let me go in. And they were nice. That's the village's oven where they cook their bread. I can't believe you drove from Kentucky and you're sitting here watching this.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah. So in the background there, that's the village store. And this is where we held our classes, under the tree. And there was a woman one day that was selling lunches there. I didn't buy any. And then she had music playing on the radio, but it was like religious music, I'd say, of some type of chanting, something. That was a view from inside the store. Those were a bunch of kids that wanted their picture taken again. And so I took their picture, and they were tickled, and they had to look at it. But then Yagamar made sure that he got some printed copies to them afterwards. That was part of our class, and those guys messed with me a lot. And so the first thing they did when they wanted us to start there is they brought a chair for me to sit on, and it was made out of thin wire. And it's like, I looked at that and I just went, no. I looked at them and I patted my stomach and they laughed, and then they went and got me a regular chair, but they were just going to mess with me. And then the guy in the green, he was the asshole in the bunch. Every crowd's always got an asshole. But we did okay, but everything had to be done through an interpreter. And so I showed them my slides I was kind of showing you earlier. And so these two girls, Peace Corps girls, they showed up on their bicycles. They'd been back to Kaolack, and both, their villages were like 30 miles farther out. And we hauled them around in the pickup and took them back to their villages after we got done. But they helped me a lot. I mean, Yagamar barely knew enough English to get by, and he didn't know anything about farming. He just didn't have a clue. And those girls had been there long enough, they could go, yeah, but they're lying about that. They don't really work the ground, they just say they do, that kind of thing. And so this little gentleman here, pretty sharp guy. He was a sub-chief. He was the vice chief, or whatever you call it. The chief was always too busy to come. He was always out in the bush. But he wanted to meet with me. And so, the last day we finally met, that was the village well. They just got running water in. And then there was an aid group out starting to put these tanks out in the village garden. And so the women took care of the garden. And that was probably a quarter of a mile from that well, and at this time, until they get them tanks going, they were carrying all that water in their heads to irrigate those vegetable crops from the well. Like I said, they get 16 inches of rain. They don't get much. Anyhow, woman with the young child, I was trying to get her picture all the time, and the old bat in front of her wasn't gonna have me do it. She just kept, I'd move over, then she'd move over. So then they wanted to get a picture taken, so, and I tried to take my stogie out of my mouth, and Yagamar wouldn't let me. He insisted I keep it in the whole time. And so I wasn't trying to be arrogant in front of him. But they wanted to get a picture taken. And so that gal in the blue in the middle, and she's kind of happy, and she had just goosed my butt. And she was so tickled, and they were all laughing. And so they do all the garden work. So now here's a farmer and his two sons out hoeing peanuts. You can see the short-handled hose they got.
Yeah.
They call them women's hose. Men can have longer-handled hose, but when women are out there hoeing with a baby on their back, they need to balance the shorter. Anyhow, he has them working. And so they'd work from early in the morning till about 10 o'clock, and it got hot. And then the guys all ended up under this tree, and that's how they spent the heat of the day telling lies, I think. And so I asked if I could see a home, and this one young man took me to his family's home. He was more modern, but they have a center courtyard, and then all these buildings around that courtyard, and there are different rooms. And so that's a bedroom, and so then one night Yagamar took me to his mother-in-law's home in Kaolack for to eat couscous. And so he's standing, him and Alcim are standing in front of the gates there, and you go through the gates, and there's your open courtyard. And then all the rooms around it are different. One's a bedroom, and one's a kitchen, and one's a living room. And so they've carried their customs from the villages into the cities. And you know, I didn't say this earlier, and I should have, but you could see how clean the villages are and how proud they are there. And then you can see the cities, and nobody gives a shit. And it's like they're wanting to keep their young people at home. The Muslim religion is really important for them to bury their dead on the same day, and so the farther out their people roam, you know, it gets to the point they can't bury them on the same day. And so it's just a whole complex of things that I think I learned more from them than they learned from me. And so anyhow, this is the inside of the home there.
Nice radio.
That was,
Surround sound.
I'm sorry?
I see surround sound of the radios.
Oh, there you go, boombox.
Yeah.
So an aid service built this grain storage where the village stored their grain. Before that, this was a traditional way, and that's a homemade basket up on stilts to try and help control the pests. This is young millet, and that yellow leaves that you see them holding there, they have a parasitic plant underground that's called strega, and it kills the plants up above and takes all their juice from them. And so he claimed that was strega damage. Boy, that jumped a lot of jumps. So we were at class one day, and I said, so show me what you plant your millet with. And they didn't bring me this one. They brought me one obviously out of the junk pile. I mean, a wheel was missing, a shovel was missing, a shoe. And it's kind of like, I looked at that and went, nah. They were messing with me again. And you know, you got somebody here that you think might give you some help, you're not going to show them the good stuff. And so then they went and got this one. But this is what the government gives them to plant their peanuts. And I mean, if you look at that wide shoe, and the shovels behind it are deeper than the shoe, and they're planting little millet seeds. You know, they traditionally planted 3 seeds per hill, and that's how they did it. And now they're just putting it in the planter and dumping it in there. I said, man, if we could do one thing to help them, would be to create an attachment with a runner on it for Milo-sized seed and a drag chain to cover it. And so I finally got Yagamar to take me to a local blacksmith, and we spent a half a day trying to tell him what we wanted, and this is what he came up with. I mean, it was like, that's bad. So I had to pay $8 for that.
It wasn't what you had in mind.
No, not at all. I wanted a flat shoe that would lay the seed down in a furrow and just a drag chain to cover it, but it didn't work. That's one of their cultivators. That's a stump for grinding their couscous.
To make flour?
Yep,
Oh,
that V cultivator. I really cringed when I seen that. Think of all the feeder ruts that's ripping out. So they took us out to this one young man's farm who's supposed to be the most progressive farmer around, and that corn looks pretty good. And this is his wife, and she's sprinkling a little bit of fertilizer by each plant. And so she's going down the rows and sprinkling a little bit of fertilizer. And as soon as she seen me taking her pictures, then she had to quick turn around so she could show me her passenger. She was proud of that. And so he's out there cultivating the corn. And they get down to the end of the row, and those 2 oxen just turn around and come back in just the right rows, and away he went. He never even slowed down. I mean, he was doing it at a fast walk. He turned around and went back the other way.
Donn, were they all using head yokes like that on their draft animals?
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's French.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what got me was the connection between the yoke and it's just a rope. I mean, it's just you'd think they could have something a little more stable. But so that's millet. It's got the long, narrow head, almost like round lakes. What do they call them? So that's that silly blacksmith that we couldn't get across. So this is KMR, and so we took Danielle back to her post, and they actually had some sewer system that was a toilet with a bucket and soap. That's the first one I'd seen outside the hotel. This was a room she was staying in, and this was her host. And she says he's a very important man in the village. And he's like the equivalent of what would be a senator in the United States. And she says, he's a damn crook. She says they keep trying to send aid to the village all the time in KMR. And he says he'll take 90% of it, and then he'll let 10% of it trickle on through, so they think he's a wonderful person. But he keeps away the majority of it. And so it's kind of typical. And everything I found out, they said they try and do all their direct aid directly to the villages, like through that Swiss nonprofit, where they can help them directly rather than go through the government structure, because most of it wouldn't even get down to the villages. The corruption's so bad. And when I was working with the village, I just said, there ain't no way that this is going to work. I tried to work with them on budgeting. So how much do we have to hold back for you to survive on, and how much you know, can we sell if we produce over that amount? They argued for 2 hours. They couldn't come up with any concept of rationing or budgeting. Nobody in the village could count. Nobody could write. So how do you form a co-op? How do you have shares? How do you keep things fair for everybody? And then I made the comment that, well, you know that when you do this, then you can't sell it all at once. You got to process it and sell it throughout the year when people need it. And, oh, that was horrible. They could not do that. And I was like, why is that? And they said, well, if somebody asks for it, we give it to them. If somebody asks you for something, you give it to them. So if they see you've got millet there and ask for it, you give it to them. And so I guess you could hide coins or whatever, or dollars, but you know, it wouldn't work for them, they claimed. And I just had to reflect. I'm sitting here trying to preach to them, and they're teaching me a lot of moral things that I don't even think about. And you know, and we got to talking about, they want to know what a bag of seed corn costs, hybrid seed corn. How much does a bag of hybrid seed corn cost? At that time, it was $300 for 50 pounds. And I said that, and Jagermeyer kind of figured it up, and all our eyes got this big, you know. It's just incomprehensible. And the last thing they need is hybrid seed corn over there. I mean, it would ruin what little system's there. And you know, and then they wanted my modern equipment. They go, if we had a tractor like that, you know, we could farm a lot more. And I said, well, everything I see has been farmed. If you'd farm a lot more, what would you farm? Well, I could farm the neighbor's farm. Well, then what's the neighbor going to do? You know, or what is his boys going to do? Does that mean they got to go to town because you're farming more to pay for that tractor? Is this what you want? Oh no, that ain't what we want, you know. And so we had a lot of those kind of discussions, and I felt good about that. I don't know if I got it through to them or not, but some years after I was over there, a friend of mine in Wisconsin went over for a mission, and she brought me back a bag from that. They formed the co-op, and they were selling bagged couscous in the market. And I've got that bag falling apart in my trunk right now, but they actually did it, and they did it in spite of me, not with my help, because I didn't see how it ever happened.
You had a picture of it.
I think it's in here somewhere. I hope so. Anyhow, before we left KMR, that was a brand new restaurant, so brand spanking new. And there's this one soap, and they were cooking in others, and then they bring you a plate and a bunch of spoons, and you just all eat out of the plate. That was really, really good. Boiled eggs, or hard-boiled eggs, and a lot of the other stuff. So then we took the other one back to Yongo, and that was down by Gambia, and there was a war going on there. We were within 4 miles of the border, and that's how we got there, 7 miles, driving through the field road. 200 people there. This is going back to the airport, and so there was a street peddler selling underwear. Well, I'll be darned. I wonder where that bag is. It isn't in that presentation. I must have another one somewhere.
Yeah.
Are you done, Donn, or did it mess up?
No, I'm done.
Oh.
Somewhere he had a
Last slide.
picture of the bag of millet
Yeah.
that they sent back.
I need to. We put this off the flash drive, and I don't know how long that's been on my flash drive.
Oh, yeah.
That probably was on my flash drive before she brought that bag up.
Yeah,
No,
it
they don't.
doesn't have anything else on it,
No.
on here.
So anyhow, that's no big deal. But I keep telling people I was only there for 2 weeks, so you know, they sweep everything in the winter, so there's no cover. Everything comes off.
Off the fields, you mean?
Off the fields.
And they feed it to the livestock?
Oh, well, a lot of the peanut hulls, that one truck that was all loaded down, all those peanut hulls going to the city, feed the livestock in the cities, which is crappy feed. But they sweep everything, and you know, I'm wanting to talk about cover crops and the wrong thing to do, and it's like, I've only been here 2 weeks. What the hell do I know? Maybe there's a reason that they're doing that is very logical that I don't know about. And so I just didn't have enough knowledge to preach to them.
Well-
Now, the girls said that Peace Corps is working with them on some cover crop test plots and stuff and doing that where they're longer, but in my project, I was afraid I'd do more damage than good.
What was their soil like?
Crap, farmed out clay,
Yeah.
No topsoil.
no topsoil to speak of. no.
The bag of millet that they brought back is very professionally packaged. It looks very, like, it looks good, you know, yeah.
That would be someone would cook and use for food, right?
Yep. That would
How
be-
did they make soup out of it, or?
Kind of, or replace it rice, in rice or wheat.
Make bread with it, or?
They grind it like in that tub for that kind of thing, but you know, I would say it's a staple that would replace the rice or the wheat. And they don't raise wheat there, and Senegal is the country's so geographically different. I mean, I was right down on the southern end by Gambia. You get to the northern end, it's next to the Sahara Desert, and you actually got the camel trains going out into the desert on the northern end of.
Less rain than 16 inches in.
Yeah. And then you get to the eastern side, and then it gets more tropical. And so it just kind of depends on what area of Senegal you're in. The thing about Senegal is they were a democracy yet. They had a president, they had elections, and almost all the neighboring countries were in civil wars at that time, and people were just flocking into Senegal. So they didn't know how long they could continue to host things like that, and so that was kind of a unique thing, but I'm really glad I did it. It was an experience I hope to do again before I get too old. I had it lined up. I was going to try and do Madagascar, and
Can we pass these
sure,
out?
that's fine. And then COVID broke out.
So what was the follow-up with NCBA of your trip? What did they?
Hang
And
it.
they, you know, I did
Yeah,
several
yeah, it's just
presentations in
a-
Washington DC on this PowerPoint, and they really liked that. And the guy that kind of held my hand through it all, I did CBA, isn't with him anymore, but he's still a Facebook friend. And so when this come up, I was doing this presentation, he really liked that. And so basically I did a report, and you know, they keep sending me emails wanting me to do it again, you know, and I want to someday. It was, I think, a learning experience for me.
Can you tell us something about
Go
these?
back and see how things have changed,
Yeah, you know,
or if they've changed.
well, you know, I was showing everybody here how backward they are. You know, Dan Nagengas had spent 9 years of his career over there 30 years ago. He says, I am shocked to see cell phones in their hands. He says, I would have never imagined that happening. So they're making their progress in different ways. And so we don't want to fault them too much.
It might be their status symbol though, because the TV was
Sure.
a status symbol, and they had no business having a TV.
We got 3 stations in. 2 of them were in French or Wolof or whatever, and they were almost all sports, either soccer or basketball. They liked their basketball. And I couldn't understand them, but I could figure out the game. The other one was BBC News, and I got better news information about America when I was in Senegal than I ever get here. I mean, it was in depth, it was logical, it was thought out, and it's like, we don't know how bad we have it here, our news. These aren't old, they're made by craftsmen using old ways, and they had this kind of square in Kerouac, and I had bought some face masks, a couple next to the hotel from a peddler shop that I paid way too much for, and was obviously made in China or somewhere type thing. And Jagamar was not happy with me when I did that. And so then he said, I want to take you to a square where you can buy some things to take home. We did these, and I didn't have to pay that much for them, and These were made by local craftsmen.
Were you expected to barter?
Well, if I was bad at it because I didn't.
Did you?
I bartered it at an expensive place. But, you know, there is kind of a whole nother part to the story, and that's getting back home. And so, you know, got to the airport, you know, Yagamar, you know, he had kids that were staying with other family members because they couldn't afford to keep them and things like that. And when I left to go into the airport, I gave Yagamar all the cash I had in my billfold except for $20 to get home with. And I, you know, it was maybe $50 I gave him. He just about fell over. I mean, he was just staggered by that. I mean, the exchange rate there, and yeah, he was just floored by me giving him $50. But anyhow, you know, I'm a farmer, and I'm worried about foot and mouth disease. I'm worried about all the shit you're going to take back home. I get to the airport, I take off my tennis shoes and I throw them in the trash, and I go into a souvenir shop and buy me a pair of sandals to wear home. And before I get around the corner, there are people digging my tennis shoes out of the trash can. And anyhow, I wore them sandals home, and back through Brussels, and then and we came into New York, LaGuardia, and you know, I had to fill out all the shit. Have you been on a farm? Yes, I have. You know, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I have. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, I have. I get to customs, and they make me go through a different line. Nothing happens. And they just send me on through, and you want to know if I had anything in my suitcases? And I went, no. and finally, I turn around and go back, and I say, you do realize I've been on farms for 2 weeks in Senegal, you know? Don't I have to get sanitized or something? Nah, you're fine. I mean, if we're relying on customs to keep foot and mouth disease out of this country, we're screwed. I mean, I took extreme precautions. I mean, I either burnt everything that I brought home, or it went right in the wash machine and everything was washed, and I was really worried about that. So I think that's a learning experience, and I'm a little nervous about our MBAF here too now, obviously.
Was that on the, are they on the equator?
Pretty close,
Okay.
pretty close. I think it's just a little south of there yet, I think.
But the terrain varied quite a bit, right?
Well, it didn't in my area. It was pretty flat in my area, you know. But I would guess so toward the east, from what I heard others talk about.
Don, with the peanut surplus, were they taking acres out of peanuts then? Or were their practices about the same? You know, I think of peanuts being a nitrogen fixer, and the corn and the millet depleting the soil.
I still seen more I seen more peanuts than any other crop. You know, about everything was peanuts, you know, mostly. And so I'm guessing not, but I didn't follow up on that exact question. But you know, the doorman, he wanted me to bring him back to the United States with him. You know, he had to share his tea with me one night when we were sitting out there. I mean, it was this little bitty tiny tea cooker, silver, and he brewed it up, and I mean, it was like 10-fold espresso. I mean, it was so strong, you know, that I didn't know what other bugs I was drinking, but I did it anyhow, and I insulted him. And, you know, you take me back to America with you. I don't think I can do that, buddy. And, you know, later on, they tried to do an exchange after I did that, where they brought some over here, and then they disappeared. We didn't get them to go back home, and so they quit doing it the other side. And,
Did you eat any fresh fruits and vegetables or not?
Yeah, well, they were cooked and
Okay, but
cooked.
not, you just,
I didn't eat any raw.
yeah, we didn't eat any raw in Ecuador. Well, unless we soaked them at night on water.
Really?
Yeah, you could soak them for 20 minutes in a, they gave us iodine tablets to put in our water to soak all the fresh fruits and vegetables.
And what were the pathogens that you were
Well,
concerned about?
amoebas was the big thing,
Oh, yeah?
yeah.
Huh.
And then, ringworm was rampant. And you pick up kids, because they went to pick you up. And of course, they had ringworm, and they put their arms around you, and then before you know it, you're just covered in ringworms.
Ooh. Yeah, and you had such a soft soul, too. You just couldn't tell them no.
It's just ringworms.
I hope we get to go back.
Yeah, or somewhere else. I've got a Facebook friend now that we got to be friends back then, and it's Pamela Card from Wisconsin, and she does this literally full time. She'll be in Armenia or Moldova and she'll just go from project to project. Once in a while she'll sneak back home to see her mom, and then she's back over there. She's got a full-time American job. She puts in all the information on an agriculture email service, and so she's doing all that from whatever country she's working in, but she does that job and then she's doing these projects all over, and I hope I can pull it off one more time. Kathy, she really was worried about, something happens to you over there, hospitals, blah, 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 and she got to researching, and darn, the hospital in Keolac was actually in the Onegas network. And so then she goes, well, I guess I'll let you go.
That didn't happen. Well, thank you very much, Dawn. That was fun for me to listen to, because it brings back lots of memories of the time we were in Ecuador. You mentioned that Kathy was afraid you were going to be boiled in the pot. Well, Eugene and I actually requested Africa. And my family thought the same thing. If you go to Africa, they're going to boil you in a pot. So they were really relieved when we went to Ecuador.
Where all the drug cartels are.
Well, yeah. That's where Colombia.
Yeah.
I mean, there were. The tuna boats was what brought the drugs into the United States at that time out of Ecuador. So, well, thank you very, very much. This was fun.
Thank you.
And we have refreshments over in the other building. But Lisa, would you share about your refreshment you brought?
Okay. Well, they're tea cakes. I brought tea cakes because today is Juneteenth, and this is the tea cakes that are traditional Juneteenth celebration. They look like a cookie. It's a cookie. And I got it from the National Geographic website, and I printed off a little bit of information about Juneteenth and about the tea cakes, and it's with the cookies. So
What's the ingredients?
flour, eggs, butter, sugar, brown sugar, vanilla, just basic,
Okay.
very basic. Yeah, very. Everything you have in the cupboard and the refrigerator already. Nothing unordinary. Yes. So.
Did they have sweets in Senegal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there were. That's one thing I did. We were at the one village, and a dog kept trying to come up to me to be petted. And as soon as I tried to pet him, they'd all holler at me. And I got to share one more thing too yet. Anyhow, it turned out that there had been a Peace Corps girl there, and she befriended one of the dogs, and now it always wanted to be petted and fed, and they don't do that shit. And so, like, you bring one of them over here, and they go down to the dog food aisle of a grocery store. That blows their mind, and that we waste that kind of money on dogs and cats. But anyhow, the last thing I wanted to share was the chief. Finally, the last day, he says, the chief wants to visit with you. So he takes me to the chief, and we sat down on his flea-bitten bed, sofa thing, and there was this old rusty shotgun on the wall for decoration, and And he just starts rambling away, and he gets done, and Jagomar goes, he wants to know what's wrong with the weather. He says, everything that they know traditionally is going wrong. And he says, what's going on with the weather that we can't do what we always did? I thought, that's really something this little old scrawny chief of this village in the middle of nowhere knows something's going on. The rest of us are in denial. And so I thought that was pretty striking 13 years ago.
They read the signs of nature better than we choose to do.
Yeah, and it affects different parts of the world differently. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned dogs. One of our favorite little restaurants in Ecuador was closed down because the meat in the chalafon, they chop up little pieces of meat, they had been serving dog. And they actually closed them down because they weren't supposed to serve dog.
Oh, that's a delicacy.
I've heard it's pretty good.
And then when we were in Colombia, you could either get at this restaurant, you could get a steak or a beef steak. Well, the beef steak was like 3 times more expensive than the steak. So, Peace Corps volunteers, we didn't have much money, so we ordered the steak. It was horse.
Is it good?
Well, it was until I knew what it was. It was good.
It's actually our culture that does that. I think the French horse meat is just one of their things. I'm not saying plus or minus. I'm just saying other countries have a different attitude, a different culture.
And that's a real political problem, because we've pretty well outlawed butchering horses. And I do a lot of work with the IAC, Intertribal Agricultural Councils, the Native American tribes around the country. Those in the far west, I mean, they're getting overrun by wild Mustangs, and there's nothing to do about it. I mean, they can't do anything with them. And so we're paying ranchers down in the Flint Hills to just let horses graze on their grass till they die of old age.
They used to use that for food for the zoos, for the tigers and lions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was a big export market. I mean, the horse meat was a big export market. And, I had to testify once down at Topeka on that very issue, and I said, that damn mare that tried to kill me that time, if any of you had a mare like that, you'd be tickled pink to have it sent to butcher, And,
Well, I remember my aunt and uncle, they fed their dog horse meat. They come in a can, and the dog ate the horse meat.
Well, should we go over to the Founders Hall, because there is air conditioning over there?
This
And
really isn't too bad in here.